all the people underground, listening to the sound of the...
I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music. Today, we always end our set with some sort of throwback or request, and this one is an album that I've liked for some time, that I have felt that this artist's discography has clear highlights of albums, and I kind of have switched my opinion over time. So my goal, and Tom and I, are so close musically that I wanted Tom to see my perspective. So the album that we're reviewing is M. Ward's Transistor Radio. M. Ward is a indie folk Americana artist from California, but I mean, he's getting pretty big now thanks to Zoe Deschanel, who is ruining all my favorite bands. And hopefully M. Ward's seventh album that's going to come out here in a month or so is actually pretty good. You've previewed it, so
yeah, I liked it.
Decent. Okay, good. That's good signs for me. M. Ward's one of my favorite artists, so I'm really excited to listen to his new album. But right now we're going to review his fourth album, Transistor Radio. Now, in the M. Ward catalog, I think that most M. Ward fans will like Transfiguration of Vincent, his third album, the most, right? Now, to tell you the truth, I love every single M. Ward album. And for a long time, I thought Transfiguration of Vincent was the best. It's where you see M. Ward really experiment with his music. You have these folk tunes with a lot of just distorted guitar, raspy vocals, and M. Ward's just iconic vocals that harkens back to like Tom Waits and lyrics that match. And really, that album really it was my first exposure to any kind of music, but let alone M. Ward's discography. But then over time, as I started experimenting and listening with all the other M. Ward albums, and got more and more familiar, over time, the one I liked the least was always Transistor Radio. Over time, I started to like it more and more and more and more, until one day it hit me that this is M. Ward's magnum opus. This is his, from start to finish, his most complete album, his darkest album, all centered around heartbreak and the feeling of just the loss of a relationship and the emptiness that you feel inside. That's what this album was born out of, and it's very moving and very complete, and therefore it has become my favorite M. Ward album. Ton, what's your take on Transistor Radio?
Well, it's really interesting, the perspective that I've gained listening to this album in a reviewing mindset, because as Jake mentioned, before we started, Jake was like, I really want to review Transistor Radio. And I was like, that sounds great. I've been wanting to listen to that album more. I've always been drawn to Transfiguration of Vincent. That was pretty much where Jake just described he was at a while back. Transfiguration is my favorite one. And as I started listening to this, it hit me one morning. I was like, holy crap, I like this one better. And it was shocking to me. It really was, because I did not think there was any way it was going to overtake it, especially since on first or second listen, I thought this album was a little slow, a little boring, but once you get to know the songs, all of these songs are good.
Right.
All of them, and all of them are moving, and not only that, but Jake hit the nail on the head when he said that this is his most complete front-to-back album listen. The way that the intensity or lack thereof flows in the album, it builds like straight through those first 5 tracks, all pretty slow, pretty soft. And then once you hit 4 Hours in Washington, Regeneration #1, and Big Boat, it hits its peak of intensity, I guess. And then from there, it just tapers off for this slow ride down on the last half.
And the last 4 tracks, I think, are some of the most moving tracks ever.
Yeah, I want to point out specifically the song "I'll Be Your Bird." Is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a song that it's in a select, very rare breed of songs that I like to call emotional chameleons. That's my own term that I use to describe songs that can adapt to whatever mood you happen to be in. If you picture listening to that song when you're heartbroken and sad, it will be the saddest song you've ever heard.
Right.
If you are in love and on top of the world and you listen to that song, it's going to be totally optimistic and make you feel better about the world. And the fact that one song can do that, can run that range of emotion, is brilliant.
It says something about your songwriting talent.
Absolutely, and the lyrics in that song even match. I mean, the fact that he was able to do that, whether it's intentional or not, I don't think that M. Ward sat down and meant to make a song like that, but the fact that he accomplished it anyways, it may, I think there is such a thing as accidental genius.
Right.
I think someone can do something unintentionally and have it be brilliant, and that's what he did there.
Look at Interpol's first album.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's like this complete accident. Awesome. And another song that really accomplishes that is the song One Life Away. When you pair the lyrics with the production style,
awesome.
Being that it's the first vocals you hear, because the first track is actually an instrumental cover of a Beach Boys song. So that second track where you finally get M. Ward, his voice and his songwriting, whereas the first one just kind of sets you up for the style, what One Life Away does is it's singing about death and the death of a loved one, or like you're dead and the loved one's still alive, talking about the difference, between being underground for all the people underground, he says, and listening to the sound of the living people, walking around. And it sounds like you're listening to that song through inches of dirt. I mean, the sound fits perfectly with the message and the lyrics of the song. So what more can you want? I mean, he's tailor-making the sound to fit these songs. And once you can do that, I feel like you're just really unstoppable.
And the best part about opening the album like that, because really, the instrumental opening, M. Ward is just, he's the boss of opening albums and closing albums with instrumental. So
yeah, it's true.
What it does is it's like an intro track, but then the first real track is in the last real track, the last track, so he's really putting his vocal stamp on it. If you guys don't know M. Ward has the best folk musician's voice I think I've ever heard. I love his voice.
Style.
And that's why I never got into She and Him, was because I like M. Ward's instrumentation just fine, and his songwriting's great, but it's the voice that really does it for me, and his lyrics for that matter. And One Life Away sets up this album. It teaches you, okay, be paying attention for my songwriting and how I'm going to produce these tracks to mimic the songwriting and rap and vocals and all this. He tells you right up front, this is a puzzle, decode it. And when you start to decode it, you will realize that this is about just devastation of emotion. And it's all summed up in track 15, the last vocal track on the album. Lullaby plus Exile, one of my favorite tracks of all time. I've never heard a track in my life that more closely emulates just pure love. And I know that sounds really sappy. You're just gonna have to listen to it yourself and get your own response. But to me, that song just speaks to me, and I just think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Overall, this album is just solid throughout. Tom, I know we were talking like right before we turned the camera on. There's a spot that sags in the middle.
Yeah, a little bit for me for tracks like 10 to 13, but it's barely any. I mean, it's really just that those songs aren't as amazing as the rest of the album.
And I can see that. And to me, I grew to love those songs too, just from the fact of decoding the lyrics, listening to what he's saying, and I'm calling out your name on a radio campaign. I mean, there's lines like that just get under your skin, and just it's that same thing that you were talking about in I'll Be Your Bird, where it's a chameleon. Like that could be a really poignant lyric at times, and it can be a really like just happy, bursting with energy, and exhilaration lyric. Overall, this is a great album. Definitely should check it out. It's quiet. It's one of M. Ward's quiet. I think it's just produced quietly. What do you say? And overall, I mean, it's just solid. So just go check it out. I'm giving this a 94.
I'm going 92.
So really good album, guys. Definitely check it out. M. Ward's best, in my opinion. Although all M. Ward is good, and I'm sure his 2012 release will be excellent as well. What's your favorite M. Ward album? Let us know at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
I'm not the tiger you never had. I'm not the first in